What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today I have a great guest I was really looking forward to that I almost missed because I'm a total space cadet. But I want to welcome Bert Terhart. Hello, Bert.
I, Hello to you too. I'm glad we're able to do this because I've been looking forward to this as well. I mean, if there was a mistake to be made, I think it was me. So
No,
I,
no. You're a world traveler, my friend. You said you're gonna be there and you were. So that's awesome. So, Bert, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna read a quick about Bert
sure.
and then we'll get cooking. So everyone knows who we're playing with before we sail around the world real quick. Away we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
So guys, we have Bert Terhart. He has had a lifelong passion for the oceans and oceanography. With advanced degrees in math, physics, and physical oceanography, he has studied the role of the world's oceans and coastal seas play in moderating and regulating climate, nutrient productivity, and pollution distributions and salmon migration. A career in academics, however, was not to be. Software engineering and business drew him away from the formal world of academia. Bert went on to create software and technical tools used by health and care professionals in Canada, Great Britain, the United States, and Australia, ultimately helping in the diagnosis and treatment of tens of thousands of patients. His passion for the oceans has translated into more than 45,000 miles. That's a lot. 45,000 miles of blue
Yeah,
water sailing
yeah.
and a keen advocacy for the citizen scientists in all of us. Bert's programming and business skills have been sought out by the universities, professionals, and environmentally responsible businesses and corporations in Canada and the US. And that's awesome. I love that. I can't wait to get into this. But real quick, because I'm contractually obligated by myself, nobody
Yeah,
else.
yeah. The te-
We're the What If You Could podcast. And so I just asked my guests, do you have a what if you could thought, or was there ever a time where you go, what if I could, you'd like to share with us?
well, I guess if I was king of the world and my own taskmaster, and we tend to be our own worst taskmasters, what if I could? I would ensure that global food production continues to grow exponentially without the use of chemical fertilizers. I would ensure that we create sustainable ways to feed Earth's population without damaging ecosystems using very, very harsh chemicals, which we've been doing very successfully on both sides. So we've been doing very successful at increasing global food production, and we've been very successful doing that with with nitrogen and phosphate-based fertilizers, and that's very hard on the environment. So, and that speaks to the oceans because a very large segment of the world's population relies on oceanic food sources, and it turns out that as much as 80% of the global 80% up to 80% of the global commercial catch for certain species is illegal. Is and globally across all species, it's basically 1 in 5 fish is caught illegally. So that's a huge problem. Like the oceans are being overfished at a rate that we don't appreciate, certainly in this culture, because we don't eat a lot of fish compared to others. So if I could, then I would ensure that that sort of trend doesn't continue, and I do that by ensuring that we're able to continue to grow exponential. We continue to grow food at an exponential rate. So what if I could?
Wow. Yeah, I love that. There's so much there, and I didn't
Yeah,
realize that number. That number's astronomically,
yeah,
horribly bad.
yeah.
Um,
It's shocking. It truly is shocking. So It's
It
something to
is.
think
It
about. Yeah.
is. I mean, and I'm a big fish eater. I mean, I was a pescatarian for years, so I kind
Yeah.
of feel bad about that now. I mean, I gotta. But like I said, my wife and I are divers, and one of the things we always bitch and moan about when we're
Hmm.
bitching and moaning, and we do a lot of it, is we keep hearing all this climate crisis, tax everything, burn everything, drive
Hmm.
Teslas and don't drive Tesla, and all this stuff about this, but we never ever hear about why don't we fix and cure and heal and take care of our oceans, which are so crucial to the
Hmm.
climate and food production. Why
Yeah.
don't they talk about our oceans?
Well, I think it's a very hard thing to regulate because there's so many countries involved. It's like trying to end the whale fishery. It took decades and decades and decades because there was countries who just refused to stop whaling, and then it took pressure from basically the entire international community to stop those countries from doing that. And as soon as those populations rebound, then the pressure is back on. So whale populations, for example, humpback whale populations, certainly on the west coast of North America, have rebounded. So there's this, not that we're hunting humpbacks, but suddenly there's this pressure on the humpback whale population in a number of different areas. Not just hunting, but they're tortured by people who chase after them in small boats and want to watch them and want to dive with them. And the same thing here with orcas, with killer whales, both resident and transient killer whales. They're just tortured to death by tourism. Like they simply cannot exist. They cannot do the things that they would normally do, like hunt and eat, without being chased around by people in zodiac. So we're not just overfishing the oceans. We're stressing them in ways that aren't immediately apparent. And one of the ways that we're struggling with that is like I said, because there's so many international the international fishing fleet is exactly that, international. And there are countries who we don't necessarily agree with across the board, certainly China being one of them, where they just don't care. They literally don't care. Um, I've run into the industrial commercial Chinese fishing fleet offshore, off of the Falkland Islands and in the deep in the South Tasman Sea, and it would shock you. It would shock you what was going on. It shocked me. I was warned about it actually going past the Falkland Islands, saying that if you run into these guys, you really got to stay out of their way because one, they're in international waters and we can't do anything about it, and they've literally just run over boats and they don't care because um, if they just want to keep as low profile as possible. So if you happen to be in the way, then it's just too bad for you. So there's and we even in North America here we do crazy things. So as an example, up in Kodiak, Alaska, in the town of Kodiak, on the island of Kodiak, there's a and everyone we know that we're supposed to be looking after wild fish stocks, certainly species that are at risk like wild salmon, because those species are impacted by nearshore activities like forestry. And there's a fish plant there that processes 3 million pounds of wild sockeye a year. And the plant runs entirely on salmon. So they use the salmon oil to fire the boilers, to create steam, to create the electricity. And what do they do with the 3 million pounds of salmon? They turn it into dog food. So
Wow.
there's this wild disconnect, right, between. So we have this. So I guess what I'm trying to say, it's a problem that we come across on every scale. Okay, so why? And if I'm talking too much, but you got to stop me here because I
No, no,
tend to
no, 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 no,
ramble.
no. I'm just making notes because I don't want to stop you.
Yeah. All right. So the issue politically, the issue is that it's very easy to sound good politically. It's very easy to say that, well, we're going to do something about ocean acidification. So if you're a diver, you know what that you know that the coral reefs across the world are being. Oh, okay, so there, and it's very easy to sound good, like, oh, we're gonna create carbon taxes for this reason or that reason. It all sounds good. It turns out that none of it. Doing good is really hard, and doing good typically costs a lot of money and costs votes. So it's way easier to sound good than it is to do good. So the things that I've tried to do in my life, certainly, as a originally as a scientist and then as a citizen scientist and then as an explorer and adventurer, as it were, is to engage in good policy. And sometimes that means a hard conversation because it's very easy to sound good. It's much, much more difficult to do good.
So I've got to take you back real quick,
Sure.
because this drives me crazy.
Yes,
I
it
I
should.
understood I understood, in the 1800s, 1700s, whatever, back in the day, back, they were chasing down these whales in wooden boats with harpoons
Hmm.
and stuff, and I always rooted for the whale, right?
Hmm.
But they were using almost every piece of the whale for food, for oil, for
Hmm.
lamps, for things like that. So what on earth are they doing with whales now? Who eats whale? Why are we killing all these whales? I had no idea the whaling industry was still that big.
Well, it's been greatly diminished, of course, because of international pressure. But there are countries like Japan who still actively whale and use it as a food source. And it's not necessarily a food source for you and I. It's a food source for sometimes it's a food source for pets. And whale oil is still incredibly valuable because it's almost a perfect machine oil. Um, so it never gums up, for example. So it's great for lubricating very fine machinery.
So we're killing these magnificent creatures to feed dogs and I love dogs, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, but my
yeah,
dog, when I had dogs, first time in my life I haven't had a dog, but when I had dogs, hell, he'd eat anything. I drop it on the floor,
exactly.
he'd eat anything, right? I don't
Yeah,
need to kill a magnificent species
yeah.
to feed my dog. And I certainly know that we have tons of petroleum and other sort of lubricants that we have. Although probably whale lubricants are better for the environment than
Mm,
others, but I mean, still, I don't need to kill one of these magnificent
correct.
creatures to do any of that. That's
Well,
insane.
well, it's the same as, I mean, there was a one time, it was probably maybe more than 10 years ago, there was a someone had gone undercover, fully undercover to video um, the slaughtering of dolphins because dolphins were being used as a food source. So so there's other cultures who just think differently than we do.
And
So
how many sharks a year do they decimate just to take their fins?
oh, it's the number again is astronomical. Like
Tens of
the
millions, isn't
yeah,
it? Tens of millions?
well, I don't have it right in front of me. I could look it up very quickly, but I
But
don't
it's a
have that.
lot.
Yeah,
It's an astronomical number.
it's an it's a completely and utterly unsustainable number. Like the world's oceans, like when you get offshore and look, it's basically turned into a desert. I mean, it always was a desert in some sense because there's not a lot of nutrients far offshore. All the nutrients are coastally bound because it washes off the land through the via the rivers into the oceans, and that's why most of the commercial fish catch that we would know, like cod and salmon and things like that, are coastally bound generally. But there still are large pelagic fishes like tuna. Like tuna, for example, this idea that people have always been eating sushi is complete garbage. The demand for tuna, like for sushi, to turn it into sushi or sashimi, that's recent. That's only decades old,
Mhm.
and we've utterly, we being the humans as a species, have utterly we haven't just decimated those species. We've reduced them by several orders of magnitude. Like the the large bluefin tuna are virtually extinct in almost every ocean where they used to be, except in a very few places. Like here in Canada, the one place that you can still catch large, the 1,000-pound tuna that you see on specials that get sent to Japan in 24 hours. That's off the coast of PEI. It's the only place in the world where you can still catch those fish. And they congregate there because that's where their food source is. They eat mackerel, so there's lots of mackerel there, and then that's where they go. But those fish used to be in every ocean. When I was sailing around the world, I came across a Spanish boat. There's only a handful of boats I came across. I only talked to one boat, and that one boat was a fish boat, a commercial fish boat, and they were fishing for black marlin deep in the tropical Pacific, and the boat was out of Spain, and they had. I mean the fish used to be in the South Atlantic. They fished that out, then they went to the North Atlantic, fish it out, then they went through the Panama Canal to fish near shore, tropical near shore equatorial Pacific waters. They fished that out, and then now they were way out. They were 2,000 miles away from shore, and they were and one trip on that boat is 3 years. So, and they don't return the catch back to Spain. They return the catch back to the shore of South America. So that's just one species. And black marlin, it's very difficult to catch. They're basically doing it by hand and hand lining. So it's not like there's nets everywhere, but it is the manner. It's not just shark. It's because we hear about shark fin soup and everything like that, but it's every species, especially the pelagic species. Pelagic being those fish that live offshore, like great white sharks, like bluefin tuna, like things like mahi mahi and other fish like that.
Yeah.
So
I
I.
think the thing about the shark, so I think like what you're talking about with the chain of events of this eats that eats that, that
Mhm,
eats that, that eats that. I mean, when you start removing so many key predators to an ecosystem, it
mhm.
completely screws up the ecosystem. Not only are we overfishing, but we're also screwing up the ecosystem of the
Yeah,
ocean by removing the
yeah,
chains of how the natural processes have always flowed.
yeah, yeah. That's a really interesting point because it doesn't matter what link in the chain you remove. It could be the top of the food chain like sharks, or it could be squid. Albatross eats squid, and one of the things that the Chinese or the commercial Chinese fleet was catching illegally was squid by the millions of metric tons. And what that and as a result, the albatross population in the Southern Ocean is collapsed by a factor of 10. 10. So, and so there, if you remove sharks, it's the top of the food chain, and then the ecosystem starts to collapse because it's not no longer in balance. Or you pull it out of the bottom of the food chain, which happens to be at squid, the same thing happens. And
What are
it's
they
gonna.
doing? What are they doing as far as like we dive a lot in Cozumel, and my wife actually dives all over the world. I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not able to get away as much as she is because she's retired, but she's been all over out in some amazing places. But you know what we've found in a lot of different parts around the world is because of how prominent shipping is, and these
Mhm.
guys still just dump their crap and they dump their
Yeah.
bilges wherever they want. It's like in Cozumel. You've got the lionfish, which is a
Mhm.
gorgeous, beautiful,
Mhm.
slow-moving fish. But the challenge is it's decimating the wild fish of Cozumel because there's no natural predator,
Mhm.
for the lionfish in Cozumel.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's in Thailand or whatever, that's where it's supposed to be. So, I mean, even just the shipping
Oh
when they
yeah.
are dislodging their ballast
Mhm.
and releasing fish, it's just not supposed to be there. Species
Yeah.
that's just not supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's that's another huge problem. I mean, look at the Chinese jumping carp in the central interior of the United States, making their way up river systems because they came as pets, then were released, end up in the rivers, and they just eat everything under the sun. And there's a huge effort to keep them out of the Great Lakes because if they're in the Great Lakes, that's the end of just about every other species, including important species that people care about, like salmon and lake trout and things like that. So and it goes from large to small, and it's not just a coastal problem; it's a problem everywhere, and it is a problem like people don't realize at any one time there are 60,000 container ships at sea at any one time.
60,000.
60,000 of these ships, and not
How
only are
much of
they
these little shitty trinkets do we need? I mean, how many pair of
exactly,
suspenders do we really need? I mean, how
exactly,
much of this little crap do
yeah,
we really need? It's just so bizarre. The
yeah,
junk that comes traveling across this ocean for what? What
but
do we need this junk for?
what's even more shocking to me, if I wanted to get on an airplane and go to China, it would be like $2,000, $2,500. But yet I can order something that's my weight or more and get it shipped for free. Like how is that possible? And it'll arrive here in a couple days. How is
It's
that possible? It's
it's
possible
not,
because there's 60,000 Canadian, it's just and not just the ballast that they're dumping everywhere, which is a point that you made, which is a real threat, but they burn the worst kind of fuel, the most polluting fuel that you can get. They burn bunker oil. It's the stuff when you recycle motor oil, that's what ends up running these ships. And actually it's so bad that they have engines that run in near shore, so they're not nearly so bad in terms of polluting, and then they have engines that run offshore. The amount of pollutant, the amount of particulate that goes into the atmosphere as a result of these container ships is is equivalent or more to that of the entire population of cars in the world. So
And
there's
but the sickness is that these guys, the same guys that are preaching, if we don't completely destroy our country, or we don't do this or we don't do that, the world's going to come to an end, are the
yeah,
same people that are
yes,
cheering on these cargo ships and
that's
this
right.
manufacturing and this consumerism. It's the
Hmm.
same people.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's impossible to believe what they tell us about anything when
correct.
we see the hypocrisy of it.
Yeah, I think that's also a really good point. It's very easy to get really good research this day. You can go to a site like Consensus, or you can go to Perplexity, you can go to any one of these AI sites and ask it a really good question, and you'll get a really good answer. You'll get a really good answer that's referenced in the scientific and public literature. So there's no excuse for being uninformed. Like if you actually are passionate about something, there's no reason at all for you to believe anything other than what's in the what's in the literature. Like the people that are telling you these things, like they're sounding good, and they're sounding good for reasons that have nothing to do with the actual problem at hand. Like, and it runs quite deep because humans are very good at adapting, and we're horrible at mitigating. So an example might be an example of mitigation might be Bill Gates' idea to limit the amount of sunshine, to limit the amount of solar radiation coming to the Earth by by putting particulate matter in the atmosphere that reflects, the sunlight back out to space. And that's trying to mitigate the problem of global warming. Like that's about as dumb as the day is long.
It's so it's so bizarre on
But
every level. The one thing that changes the whole dynamic of the
yeah,
planet and humans is
yeah,
the thing he wants to block out because I
yeah.
don't know, did he patent the system that
Uh,
makes it
uh,
work? Or how much
Maybe.
money do you need, Bill? Honestly, how
Yeah,
much power and money do you
yeah,
freaking need, dude?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
bizarre, these people. It's
So
it's
this
beyond bizarre.
this idea of mitigation goes right across the board, but historically we're we're very good as a species at adapting. So if I said to you, for example, 100 in by the end of the century, 180 million people in the Mekong Delta are going to be living below sea level because sea levels are going to rise. You'd go, oh my God, that's terrible. But if I told it doesn't, it's not so bad because 130 million people have been living below sea level in the Mekong Delta for decades already. So do you think all these people are going to be standing there watching the water lap over the dike and go, oh my, throw their hands up in the air, oh my God, what am I going to do? No, they're going to adapt by putting another layer of bricks, right? It's like it's like 20,
Exactly.
30 million Dutch people live below sea level, up to, 20 feet below sea level now. So all the Dutch people are going to be standing there,
And
and I'm Dutch, so I can say this, standing there in wooden
right.
shoes, watching water, watching the North Sea lap over the Afsluit dike.
And
No,
a lot of the people who are preaching that are building oceanfront properties
yeah,
for $20 million.
yeah,
Like, but saying, "Oh, the oceans are going to rise and take you out, but they're not going to take out my new beach house
yeah,
because I'm
yeah.
different."
Yeah. Well, here in Canada, the Canadian government is very good at sounding good. So, and we have missed every, with the first people to sign on to the Kyoto Accords, first people to sign on to the Paris Accords, all these things. And we are the worst offenders when it comes to carbon emissions. And it's like it sounds good to sign on, but it's hard to do good. And there's reasons for that. There's
How how
I
many
won't talk
people
about
do you
that.
think? How many people do you think have read the Paris Climate Accords?
I don't know. I would probably say one in 10,000.
Maybe, yeah, right. I
Yeah,
mean, and,
yeah,
and it's like that big. It's like 35 pages. It's
yeah.
not a big guy. It's not a
It,
big thing to go
no,
through, right? So I've gone through it a bunch of times, thinking there's got to be more to it than this. It's a
yeah,
very because normally these things are like 10,000 pages, so no one
yeah.
can read them, right? But I mean, you read some of the things that they come up with, and you think to yourself, what is this going to do for anything? I
You know,
mean,
well,
what is
that's
this literally going to do for anything?
so it sounds good, right? To say like
Right.
we've signed on to the Paris Accords. It sounds
Yeah.
good, and no one actually reads what that is. And then if you actually read it, you go, "What the hell is this about?" It's not doing anything, and which is
Right, we're
why
cutting a we're cutting a bunch of checks to
yeah.
who? To do what? What
So
are who are we giving this money to, and what are they supposed to be doing with the money? That's
yeah,
what always gets me.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
Because like you said, it sounds good.
but it doesn't do good. It's the same with who's read the IPCC, the IPCC documents that are supposed to be addressing climate change, and I mean I've read them. One of my very good friends was on the first. He was one of the scientists who was awarded the Nobel Prize for creating those first documents. But you can take a very small chunk of that data out of those reports and report it completely out of context, and it's, oh my God, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, which is what we hear. We hear all the time that there's a that we should be afraid, be very, very afraid. People tend to be people tend to be very compliant when they become afraid.
Yeah, we
Look at
learned that really, really
yeah,
hard in the last 4 years. But
yeah,
it brings me back to what I originally, stated. What drives me and my wife so insane is you never hear them talk about the ocean. You
hmm
never hear them saying, we have a Texas size, it might even be bigger now, ball of pollution and skank and plastics just spinning around in the middle of the ocean. No one, I know there are smaller companies and stuff trying to come up with ways to clean that out of the
hmm
ocean, but I mean, our oceans do so much. It's like kelp.
hmm
We dive in a lot of kelp here in California. We
hmm
love our kelp forests, right? And
hmm
and they come and go. We've had some seasons where they've been super lush and super beautiful, like they are now, and we've had some seasons where there isn't any kelp. It's kind of
hmm
funky. But what kelp does for the ocean and what it does for the air is unbelievable.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they never you never hear that. You just hear give us money and we'll
hmm
fix the problem, but they never address the oceans.
Yeah, because the problem is, well, for the problem is intractable if you look at it with a single variate um, methodology. So it's a very complex environment. So there isn't just one thing affecting kelp populations. There's many things, and it's not necessarily a nuanced problem, but it's a complicated problem. So how do you take a complicated problem and turn it into something that turn it into an Instagram soundbite that's going to get you a vote, or that's going to get you a donation, and you just can't. And there's more than one player, right? So if you're off the coast of California, you can see the shipping go by, right? It's easy to see that. You see the offshore oil platforms, see the shipping go by. So there's all these vested interests. There's all these, and sometimes those interests are competing, and it's very difficult to get all those people on board. And there's it there's something to be said for someone who's able to negotiate a very complex treaty between competing interests. And that's the problem with the oceans. There's everybody's playing in them, everybody. And you don't have to go very far offshore. In some cases, only 3 miles before you're in international waters. And the gloves are off. You can do whatever you want. Like a cruise ship, which is, basically, my father would say it's nothing more than 7,500 toilets, floating in the ocean. What do you do with all that stuff? Well, it turns out you'd have to go. In some cases, you go 3 miles away from the nearest land, and hit the flush button.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
and it's
I've always just thought of a cruise as a big floating E. coli system with
yeah,
long lines, bad food, and smelly people. I
yeah,
just can't stand them. They just disgust me. And
yeah,
when they come in, one of the best things is during COVID. We loved COVID because everything was locked down and there's no
mhm,
cruise ships.
mhm,
So we were diving our asses off during COVID. We were
yeah,
going everywhere. They were so happy to see us.
yeah,
And what we saw was things getting better in a
yeah,
very short period of time.
yeah,
It's like, wow, we were just here 8 months ago, and now look how much things have healed in
yeah,
such a short period of time. And and that's what's so miraculous about nature. I mean, if they would just get rid of people, imagine how quickly everything would get healed.
yeah,
Don't worry, Bill Gates. I'm not saying we should kill everybody,
yeah.
but
Well,
don't
that's
you find that to be true? If we would just
yes,
how quickly things can heal if we back
yeah.
off a little bit.
Yeah, as soon as that's a really, really good point, because nature is which is we're terrible at mitigating, but nature is very good at that. If we would just but you need a big enough stick like COVID as an example. That's a big stick to shut down the pressure across the board, and just let nature take its course, and stop trying to micromanage something that's with something that's very complicated by putting particulate matter in the atmosphere to reflect the sun back into space. So that ain't going to work. But you're absolutely right, and we've seen it across the board. You've seen it diving in those places where they're frequented by cruise ships. I've seen it in fly fishing in the river in the Elk River in southwestern BC near the Montana border. Soon as the pressure gets relaxed, then suddenly those populations come back in a very big way. I've seen it in salmon populations here on the west coast. I've seen it in cod populations on the east coast. We've seen it here. Like humpbacks were hunted to near extinction here in British Columbia, in the Strait of Georgia, between 19. There was one humpback season in around 1905 or six or something like that, before 1910, and they in that one year they killed 54 humpbacks, and that was the end of any humpbacks showing up on this coast until something like 15 years ago. And suddenly now where we are now, there's humpbacks everywhere. And that well, not everywhere, but you can see, taking the ferry back and forth from Victoria to Vancouver, it's not unusual to see 3 or 4 humpback whales. So my point is, which is, I'm just trying to reinforce yours, which is, if you can wield a big enough stick to say, no, I don't care if it's cruise ships, I don't care if it's commercial fishery, I don't care if it's recreational fishery, I don't care if it's an industrial forestation. You just have to stop. We got to stop and let things sort of settle down. And I don't care if it's going to cost you money or it's going to cost the country money. In the long run, this is the smart thing to do. So it's the age-old problem, short-term pain versus long-term gain. It's why people would rather sit on the couch watching Netflix than go to the gym, right? So
and have Grubhub drop off a double cheeseburger and
yeah.
fries with a Diet Coke.
Speaking of disconnects,
And
I couldn't understand why someone would get, Uber Eats to deliver them something from McDonald's. And that has to be, there's something wrong with society when that happens. And
it's a very bizarre,
yeah.
right, world that we're living in. And the other thing that drives me completely insane is, I live in California, which is one of the most insane places on the planet. And so, they want to get rid of plastic straws, which is a
Hmm.
good thing because they're turtle colors. But in the meantime, the plastic production and the plastic and the waste that comes from this massive delivery of just, we all refuse to move, right? It's
Hmm.
just so bizarre. I mean, the waste, everything will come in massive amounts of plastic and massive amounts of wrapping and massive amounts of crap, right? But
Hmm.
we have to get rid of plastic straws. It's like you said, we don't do a good job of managing things or mitigating things. And
Hmm.
the worst person to get involved with anything is the government, unfortunately,
Yeah.
right? If you ask the government to do something, they're going to screw it up. You're
Hmm.
guaranteed. So who could step in and start trying to do this healing? Who could fix this?
Well, I think it's up to people. It's up to people like you and I and everyone else, just to engage in policy that's good. Engage in policy that sounds good. So, plastic straws, eliminating plastic straws, that sounds good, and it does some good, but it doesn't do nearly good enough. You're to my mind, you're better off engaging in a policy that has to do with eliminating plastic packaging on things that we don't need. Like the amount of plastic, like it's if you every year I used to go up to a remote island group on the west coast of Canada and participate in this. You get volunteers. They would get there because it's a very remote place, and we'd pull plastic off the beaches, and then the government would come in helicopters and remove the plastic that we found. We would typically remove 10 or 20,000 pounds of plastic off 1 or 2 beaches, and it just happens to be in a place that's part of the North Pacific, and all the plastic that we find is typically coming off fishing boats and cruise ships, like plastic water bottles that people just throw over the side. So, you could eliminating plastics is a good thing, but we need to focus on something more than just straws. And it turns out that, straws got a lot of attention because they happen to be very detrimental to sea life. And then, then there's some traction associated with that. But there's not a lot of traction with a plastic fork and knife. Like who cares?
Yeah.
Like what damage can that do? But that's the whole point, right? It's plastics across the board. These junk plastics that we literally don't need.
Well, and
And
the things that are wrapped in plastic are so bizarrely
yeah,
stupid. And some of the
yeah,
stuff you almost need a chainsaw to open up because of the plastic.
yeah.
But people don't realize, I mean, how many different fish species have they opened up and
Hmm.
just found plastic, and not just in their stomach, but literally almost in their DNA. I mean, in the walls are just the plastics in the ocean
Hmm.
are so detrimental. There's so much of it.
Well,
It
there's
just has to almost be completely stopped. I mean, it just has to be stopped, the plastic.
well the microplastics in the ocean extend from the Arctic Ocean to the Antarctic. They're in every marine environment that you can test. They found microplastics, obviously at different levels, but they're there everywhere. And they get into the food chain. They get into the bottom of the food chain. And a lot of those microplastics are washed into the ocean
Yeah.
because they end up in landfill. They degrade there. They go into the water table there, or somehow end up in the water table, and voila, they're in the ocean. And if you put plastics in the ocean, it eventually degrades. So we can adapt to those sorts of things by creating plastics that biodegrade completely and sink to the bottom as opposed to float on the surface. So there are companies I know that are making plastics that are, and they're more expensive, of course, but they do good in the sense that they're completely biodegradable. They don't turn into something that's not biodegradable, because that's what a microplastic is. It just gets to a certain size and can't get any smaller.
But I think
Um,
it's just the craziness of
yeah,
we have the paper bags, and we're like, well, we got to get rid of paper bags because we're killing too many trees. So we go to the plastic bags, and the plastic bags were just a complete disaster nightmare. The plastic bags. So now we're going back to the paper bags to say because the plastic bags were polluting, and the recycling is just gotten so much better as far as with so many things we could recycle. But I think is it Sun Chips? You know the potato
yeah,
chip company. I think don't they have a completely biodegradable bag for their chips?
I think they do. I think it
I
is
think they're one
Sunships.
of the ones. So I
Yeah,
mean, it is possible. You could keep the plastics, but I think it's the hard packaging plastics are the one that are probably be really
yeah,
tough
yeah.
to
I
get
mean,
rid of.
yeah. Those hard plastics are made in a country that doesn't care.
Right.
They just don't care. And
And
we're
they're our number one trading partner, and they're our
yeah,
number one source of everything. Everything
yeah,
is it. That's another thing. I enjoyed COVID very much. I feel bad for everyone who got sick or anyone who died, but that's another thing that COVID taught us is that our reliance on overseas, countries and stuff like that is really horrific for all countries. I mean, for
yeah.
Canada, you're in Canada, for
Mm,
United States, for everybody. And I think we learned a very harsh lesson that there are some people we really can't count on
exactly.
to do well, right? To do
Hmm.
good, to do the
Hmm.
right thing.
Hmm. Well, there's always been discrepancies in labor costs around the globe. That's been the case ever since, someone got in a dugout canoe and went down the river. What has changed is transportation costs. We've made it very, very, very inexpensive to transport goods around the world, and we've made it very quick. And that's what's led us down this path of, false sense of prosperity. Because as soon as all that grinds to a halt, suddenly we don't have anything anymore, which is what we experienced, the tip of the iceberg when it came to COVID and other places. So and other things. So you're absolutely right saying that this reliance on even some of our best trading partners and allies is a bit of a fool's errand, because it could be any shock to the system in any in the stock market. It's a black swan. It's something you can't possibly predict. There'll be a shock in some way, shape, or form, and then suddenly everything grinds to a halt. And I mean, and when everything grinds to a halt, it becomes catastrophic. So in COVID, there was riots over toilet paper, right? In grocery stores. It's just the most foolish thing, but people will kill each other over the last roll of toilet paper, and we proved that.
It's called a hand towel and a soap. All
Yeah,
right, just wipe your own butt. You don't need the toilet paper.
yeah,
It's just bizarre, right?
yeah,
That panic was pretty insane.
yeah.
Honestly, that was
But
bizarre.
exactly, it's really bizarre because none of these things need to happen. Like you said, a towel and soap, heaven forbid, right?
Right.
Yeah, heaven forbid. And that it and But so
And the
there's,
diapers, it's like, why don't we go back to cloth diapers? Dude, just
mhm,
wipe, wash the diapers, reuse them, use the pin if the kid gets stuck. That's a life lesson.
mhm,
Um, we know these disposable diapers. There are so many things that we could go back to.
yeah,
Like our wife and I do a little bit of gardening. We don't have a lot of space, but the tomatoes, the zucchini, we
mhm,
try to grow on stuff. And you started with that at the beginning about your what if you could.
mhm,
And I kind of cut you off and I didn't really go back to that, but I would love to revisit that because food, these guys who want to kill everybody for the good of the planet because we don't have enough food for everybody, even though we waste more food in the United States than
mhm,
probably anywhere. We could feed the entire world 10 times over, which is what we throw out. But I mean,
mhm.
what do you see as a way to cure the food issue that you were talking about? Sustainable food without polluting the waters, without these horrible
Mhm,
fertilizers and pesticides and all this stuff.
mhm.
What do you see as a way to get out of that cycle that we're in?
Well, technology has a lot to do with that, and if you look at industrial farming here in Canada, for example, using GPS, using really relatively simple GPS technology and mapping technology, you can finely tune what you're seeding and sowing and what you're fertilizing. So if you have a 10-acre piece of property as an example, you don't have to throw 10 acres worth of fertilizer over it because the different parts of, that soil, the soil regimes vary wildly in those 10 acres. So maybe only, 1/4 of an acre needs to be fertilized chemically, and you'll get the same yield. And and this happens in Canada. That's how large farming is done right now. It's how they're managing to exponentially grow food production and then limit what they're using in terms of fertilizers by orders of magnitude, because they know exactly how much what they know exactly the soil that they're working with and what that regime looks like. They know exactly what seed or what plant would grow well in that regime. They know exactly how much water to put there. They would know exactly how much fertilizer to put there. They know exactly, what the density of seeding is supposed to be like. And that's all automated on the back of the tractor using GPS and mapping, GPS mapping technology and very sophisticated seeding, sowing, fertilizing technology. So just leveraging existing technology we have, there's a way to, there's very good ways to massively increase food production while lowering fertilizer loads in soils. And then there are using AI as a good example. You could come up with you could generate boutique fertilizers, which are unique to particular soil regimes, which then would help those particular soils produce more. And you could manage that whole process. I mean, before it used to be, well, you'd plant one year and then, in the fall, you'd summer follow everything and let everything sort of percolate over winter and replant. That was the whole, like, this is how you would manage, soil. This is how you manage soils. First Nations in the United States and Canada, for example, Iroquois in particular, or Iroquois, the Five Nations living south of the Great Lakes, they would farm corn, and they would farm a region until they couldn't grow anything there anymore. Then they just pick up shop and go, and then move downriver and start over. So that was their extent of their soil management. So we've come a long way from that, a very long way. And it's not just here in North America. If we can export that technology and allow other countries, developing countries, to use that technology and provide them with the energy and resources to do it, then the food production in those places could go through the roof. So
Yeah, I've always believed that there's plenty of food.
oh yeah,
I just thought that there was, it's the way they managed it and the way they did it. And of course, the fertilizer that the runoff from the fertilizer is
yeah,
detrimental. I mean,
of
I
course,
live out here in California, there's a lot of agriculture and the runoff has devastated,
yes,
a lot of water sources
yeah,
because the fertilizers are so strong and it hurts
yeah.
the water. Um,
So here, just if we go back, like we were talking about good policy and bad policy. So here's an example of really bad policy. We have, bread that's gone past its whatever good before date or doesn't sell that day is thrown out here in Canada. It used to go to the food bank. So I mean, my brother would say it's good before, not deadly after, so it's fine.
Well, I'm still the guy who will take a block of cheese, and if it's got some blue on the side, I just knock that to the side and still eat the cheese. I mean,
Yeah, the same.
I don't even look at these good before or after dates unless it's really bad.
Yeah.
But bread, for example, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. It's like we
Yep.
waste more food in the United States than most countries consume. So
Correct.
you cannot tell me that we don't have enough food to feed everybody.
That's
And
right.
the food bank is a perfect example. Like
Hmm.
I shop a lot at this place called Grocery Outlet. And
Hmm.
basically Grocery Outlet is if Albertsons gets close to the no good date anymore, they sell it to Grocery Outlet and
Hmm.
Grocery Outlet discounts the heck out of it.
Hmm.
And then I go in there and buy it. I'm like, okay, so I know that this says it's got one more day until it's bad, but I don't care.
Hmm.
It's 90% off. I'm eating it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's because it's still good. And with the amount of preservatives and so much of this stuff, especially like bread and things like that,
Yeah.
you can't tell me a good or bad date is going to reflect anybody. And to
Yeah.
throw that out is sinister.
Yeah, it's sinister. It is. I can't believe that the disservice that we're doing to disadvantaged people that all over the certainly in our communities, certainly our urban communities, by throwing food out that they could use. It is sinister in the worst possible way. So it sounds it's a policy that sounds good. Oh, we're not allowing consumers to consume food that could potentially harm them. So let's not do that, which sounds like a good idea, but it's it's
Well,
incredibly poor
I think it,
policy.
also the perfectness of the food. I mean, if the
Mhm.
food's not perfect, it doesn't make it to the stores,
Correct.
right? Which is
Yeah.
so bizarre to me. I don't care if my squash has four eyeballs. If it's healthy, if it was grown properly, and most organically grown stuff that we grow in our backyard
Hmm.
doesn't look like the stuff you get in the store. It's
Yeah.
not supposed to look like the stuff you get in the store, right? So our tomatoes might look a little bit different because we have the good seeds, which are illegal in California.
Hmm.
But that to me has always been bizarre. It's like,
Hmm.
why is this food secondhand just because it doesn't look perfect? This
Hmm.
perfectionist is bizarre to me in food.
Yeah, that's and we're accustomed to seeing food like that. So I remember as a kid growing up in the prairies, and you'd go to if there was a market, there was no such thing. It was crazy talk to think you'd go to a store to buy vegetables because you can pick them out of your own backyard. What kind of lazy ass would you have to be to go to the store to buy vegetables? But times have changed. But that like they've come to the point where if you're like you say, if the carrot's not perfect, and it has to be genetically engineered to be perfect, by the way. If
Yeah.
it's not perfect, then you can't sell it, which is crazy. And it's a first world problem because when people get hungry enough, they're gonna eat it. Full
Yeah.
stop.
And when you grow your own carrots are a great example because 90% of the carrots that we pull out of the ground just look like alien creatures. I mean,
Yeah,
they don't
that
look like these
exactly.
perfect carrots. It just like doesn't make sense. But they sure taste a lot better. Our
Yeah.
tomatoes taste a lot better. Our beets taste a lot better. Um,
There's a really good book. It's called The Dorito Effect, and I would encourage everyone who's listening who cares about food to read that. The
yeah, I've
Dorito
heard of it.
Effect.
Yep.
Yeah, it's worth reading. It's definitely worth reading, and it talks about real food basically, and as opposed to what we're eating.
Which is yeah, which we really don't even know, and that's the
Yeah.
thing I was gonna bring up also is like states like California, which are just the most bizarre states in the world. I don't even know what their philosophies are on anything anymore because none of them make sense. But for example, you can't collect rainwater; it's illegal to collect rainwater.
You're kidding me.
Um, you you can't drill on your own land for water. Seeds, heirloom. There's a lot of seeds that are illegal in California that you can't bring in because they're worried about, if they bring in the wrong seeds, it can hurt our agricultural industry, which is a bunch of baloney. So there's a lot of bizarre things because they think that they're progressive and we're
Hmm.
environmentalists here in California, but they're the exact opposite. They're corporatists. They
Hmm.
aren't environmentalists whatsoever. And I've tried to get around this not catching rainwater thing, and no one can explain to me why it's illegal to catch rainwater, except that they say, "Oh, well, it hurts the underground reservoirs. It hurts
Hmm.
the aquifers." And I'm thinking, dude, you let 1 trillion gallons of water a year from rain run off into the ocean
Hmm.
because you won't build reservoirs. Are you telling me that my bucket of
Hmm.
rainwater is going to hurt the aquifer? I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think of it, the bucket of water that you collect ends up in the aquifer. It just takes a more circuitous route.
Exactly.
Full
Because
stop.
I'm going to use it to water my garden, right?
Exactly.
When it's not raining, and it's just going to go back in the aquifer.
Mm,
And I think what you said originally is that so much of this stuff just sounds good.
mhm,
And although we've got more information at our fingertips than in the entire history of mankind,
mhm,
people still won't go there. They won't question anything and go, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Let me
mhm.
question that. We don't do it.
Well, it used to, I mean, part of the idea of education a few years ago was that to teach was critical thinking. Like you didn't take everything at face value. And the other thing about critical thinking is that just because someone is an authority, air quotes, doesn't mean that they're an authority. There's this argument from authority, like the government told me to do it. Like the government says no collecting rainwater, therefore it has to be a good idea. I think we should be a little more skeptical about stuff like that. And we used to be like we used to be it used to be no, no. I want to see for like imagine the farmer growing up in Fargo, North Dakota, and some government comes up and says you can't plant you can't plant soybeans. And the guy goes, no, Mr. Government man, I'll plant you or I'll plant soybeans. You choose. So, but
I might plant both, all
yeah,
right?
I might plant both. But so we've become so complacent, to being told what to do, and that's the easy thing to do. There's a moral imperative to doing the hard thing. If you think about anything that sort of moves you down the road in a direction that's worth going, it's always a little bit easier. Like it's always a little bit harder to get to the gym than it is to lay on the couch and watch Netflix. It's always a little bit harder to plant your own garden than it is to go to the store. It's always a little bit harder to walk to the mailbox, once a week than it is to drive there. And those little tiny things that might seem hard, air quotes again, make a huge difference in the long run. So I think, for example, we talked about plastic bags. I think every grocery store shouldn't sell you bags. If you didn't bring a bag or a box, you're going to make 100 trips to your car, and you'll do that once, and the next time you'll show up with your own bag. And because we tend to be cheap across the board, and I'm not going to give you mine because I need to use mine to carry my groceries, you're going to end up with a bag that you can use over and over and over again. But the simple thing is, oh, here's a bag. It costs 2 cents. I'll buy the bag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in California now, because of COVID, they don't want you to bring your own bag in because it might have something on it. And you think to yourself, no, you guys, honestly, it's the madness of some of what the government stuff does.
Yeah.
God, there's so many more things I want to touch on with you real quick. 'Cause you're just awesome. So I wanna find out before I get away from it because I want to stay in the oceans. But software engineering and business.
Yeah.
Um, I clicked on your link. You have a software company or you're
Yeah.
involved with a software company? What does it do?
Well, I've always, for most of my adult life, almost all my adult life, I've been a software guy. So, and I fell into that, and I fell into the healthcare niche. So, um, I'm, I'm not run, I'm the chief technical officer for one of the largest medical clinics in Canada. We see about 1,000 patients a day. And the software that I wrote runs that clinic, from patient outreach to patient intake to the prognosis and diagnosis and communications internally and externally. And then I've had a couple of software companies that I've run and or started and sold, and probably you may have come across LeadBrain.ai, which is my ode to small business. My father was a small businessman, and every small business is plagued pretty much with one question, and that is this customer who's walking through the door, is that my last customer? They're very good at what they do, but they're not necessarily good at, they're not, by definition, they're not good at marketing. Then no one wants to be, no doctor ever decides to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, a plumber, roofer, doesn't make any difference, a hard landscaper, because they want to be really good at social media or want to be really good at search engine optimization, all these things. But
Right.
I've had a lot of years in those fields, so and I understand small business from that perspective. So that's what LeadBrain is focused on. That basically getting, when someone asks where do I spend my money in this day and age, they ask that question online. They don't necessarily ask their neighbor. They don't. We consume things in a different way. Certainly, and we get information in a different way, and all that information is online. So if that business professional in the form of a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, if an accountant, they get their clients and customers. When someone asks the question, who do I give my money to? They ask that question online, and that business appears in that conversation in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in search or whether it's social media or whether it's YouTube video, whatever the case might be. But if you're not in that conversation, that business never lands on your doorstep. And that's what we do. We make sure that the people that we're working with, those businesses, they land in that conversation that their ideal customer is having when they want to spend money. And that's a good thing for small business. It alleviates this idea that, is this guy walking through the door the last guy? And then, so I have a soft spot for that sort of thing and that sort of technology. I've been doing that for a very long time, but I also have been involved in the healthcare niche for a very long time. So that's my job with this very large clinic here in the Lower Mainland in British Columbia.
Well, that's awesome because we know small business drives, most
Yeah,
economies. I mean, small
exactly.
businesses is the driver
Mhm.
besides these mass corporations. But so you're in the healthcare. So we here in the southern part of Canada, don't, the United States,
Yeah.
we don't understand. We hear about Canadian free. Like, oh, wow, if you live in Canada, all that stuff would be free. You don't have to pay these outrageous medical bills and stuff. And in America, Obamacare completely wiped out and devastated the healthcare industry. Yeah, I said that. You
Mhm.
can get mad at me if you want, but it's true. So what is the difference between Canadian healthcare and American healthcare?
Well, fundamentally, I mean, I lived in California for close to 8 years, and I lived in Santa Monica Valley, and then I lived in Laguna Beach. So and we had healthcare. So the
Nice
fun,
area,
yeah,
Laguna Beach. Love
it's
Laguna Beach.
yeah, it's good work if you can get it. So the fundamentally the difference in Canada is that you have no choice. So in terms of paying, we pay similar healthcare costs. We're just taxed through the nose for it. So it ain't cheap. We've already paid it, and it comes right off your paycheck. Comes directly off your paycheck, and it goes up every single year. Healthcare is not cheap in Canada because we're taxed. We're taxed for it in the same way that Holland is taxed, or the people in the Netherlands, or the people in the Scandinavian countries. But what you have here is no choice. So you go to a doctor, and you have no choice in the matter. You're going to go to this doctor, and the wait times for things here in Canada are absolutely it's shockingly bad. So healthcare, in terms of the delivery of it here, is really poor compared to the United States, and it's about the same. I mean, you can get really good healthcare, you can get really good health insurance in the United States, but you have to pay for it, of course, right? And if you're employed, typically your employer will help meet those costs. But it's an upfront cost. It's not hidden in the taxes that you pay. So our the tax brackets in Canada. I mean, we're taxed at a rate far greater than you are in the States. And it's not just that. There's a lot of that money goes into a lot of the taxation ends up in general coffers. So here in Canada, out of every dollar that you make, you get to keep somewhere between 5 and 10 cents. The rest of it is taxed. So you pay income
Wow.
tax, but then you go to put gas in your car, and we pay carbon tax. And the if the Liberal government decides, if they get reelected, they're going to quadruple the carbon tax. If you and then if you heat your house, then you pay tax. If you, of course, there's goods and services tax, and then there's provincial sales tax, and then there's tax on tax on tax. And it ends up that when everything is said and done, after you've, and my house, I have to pay property taxes. I have to pay, I mean, it's not so much different in the States, but the rates are much different. And all that money goes into the general coffers in terms of government, and some of that ends up in healthcare. So I would much rather pay for private health insurance and know exactly what I'm getting, and that allows me a choice of providers, than it is to have the government tell me, what's good for me and who's good for
Yeah.
me. I'd
That's
rather make
that's
that choice
that's
myself.
insanity. That's like living in California, except the weather's colder.
Yeah.
California's the same way. Basically, if you move, they
Mhm,
tax you. You don't,
mhm,
so you try not to move because
mhm.
they'll come up with a new way to tax you. And our
Yeah.
current governor is kind of like Carney, your Mark Carney guy.
Mhm.
He's kind of
Yeah.
like him. It's he just sits around and thinks of new things to tax. It's the most bizarre
Yeah.
thing I've ever seen in my life. And then they wonder why everyone's leaving and industry's leaving and businesses are leaving and people are leaving. It's
Mhm,
like, dude, because you've made it impossible to live here, and it's really sad. Like I said, Laguna Beach. I mean, if you live in Laguna Beach and you've been there for 30 years, you've got it made because of
mhm,
our property tax base is still locked in to Prop
mhm.
13, which they're going to get rid of. But if you try to buy a house in Laguna Beach, I don't know how people buy houses in Laguna Beach because they're an average house is a couple million bucks.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's really bizarre. California's outrageously expensive. But I don't want to get too much into
So
that.
here, let's we
Yeah.
can let's speak to that in a very short order. In that, for example,
Okay.
here in Canada, talking about poor policy and poor regulation. If you're building a house and it costs you $10 to build the house, you'll spend between $3 and $4 of those dollars on regulation and permits.
Yep.
So only between $6 and $7 of those dollars are spent with some guy, or girl banging a hammer. Everything else is just goes straight into general revenue for the government, and it makes it impossible to make affordable houses for people who want to buy a house, and it makes almost impossible for people who to come up with this affordable housing thing. So it's just really bad policy across the board, has these very far-reaching consequences, and even when it comes down to housing or the environment, it's the same sort of same sort of
Well,
thing
in
over and over.
California, I'm sure it's the same as in Canada, because this is
Yeah,
what they'll do. They'll say, well, we want to build this. And they'll say, great, well, let's put you through an environmental study.
yeah.
So we fund this project, and then they spend 8 years in environmental study, and then they say, okay, well, we've approved it with a few changes, and they go, well, it's too late. We've run out of money. Our funding's disappeared. So
Yeah.
let's start our funding process again. They say, okay, and then you say, well, we've got our funds. We're ready to start. And they go, well, now you've got to do a new environmental
Hmm.
and nothing ever gets done.
Yeah.
It's the most bizarre. And this general fund that you talk about is our governor's favorite thing, right?
Hmm.
Everything goes in the general fund, right? He's
Hmm.
got we're going to raise your taxes $1 a gallon for gas, and then money's going to go for roads.
Hmm.
Ends
Never.
up in the general fund.
Yeah.
We're going to raise this another 75 cents for schools.
Hmm.
It goes in the general fund. So they love the general fund.
Yeah, and it sounds good, right? Because everyone's driving, the roads are full of potholes. You go, okay, if we need to fix the roads, I'll do it, but it never ends there. So
It never gets there.
no, no,
So I've got a question for you that I wanted to ask. So you have traveled, you've sailed more than 45,000
yeah,
miles.
yeah.
And over what period of time have you been on the ocean blue?
Well, I've been sailing pretty much my whole life. Like I grew up sailing. My father was a sailor, so it sort of runs in my blood. But most of those miles, I sailed nonstop around the world. So solo, nonstop around the world. And that was in 2019 and 2020. That was close to 29,000 miles. And since that, this summer I sailed another 6 or 7 thousand miles. So that number is above 50 now. So a good
Wait, so you decided to sail around the world and you planned it before COVID.
right.
And then when you got around
Yeah.
the world, you landed in COVID world. That
Yeah.
had to be bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. So people think that what you think is when you go away and do, because I was alone at sea for 265 days. So people think you're going to come back changed, right? But it turns out when I came back, the whole world had changed because the whole world is turned
Exactly.
upside down. I was declared by Yahoo News actually as the safest man on the planet. If you actually Google safest man on the planet, my name will come up there because I was at
That's
sea.
awesome.
I left.
You had literally quarantined more than any human.
I was the most quarantined human on the planet. So, and that which
Now,
is
did
what,
you do this for research or for shits and giggles, or what was your purpose to
well,
sail solo around the world?
there's a number of reasons. You have to have a lot of reasons if you're going to do something crazy because you're going to burn through one or two in the first couple days or the first couple hours. So One of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to follow in the wakes of all the famous hydrographers and explorers and adventurers. So that would be
Wait,
Cook and
wait,
La.
wait. Did you say hydrographers?
Yeah, a hydrographer is someone who makes a map of the ocean.
Oh, very
So
cool.
as
I've
as
never heard
opposed to
that.
a cartographer is making maps on land.
Oh,
So cartographer, or hydrographers, guys like Cook, and it was a
hydro
uh,
meaning water. So
hydro
yeah,
meaning water and ographer
cool. That
meaning, yeah.
makes
Anyway,
sense.
so everyone who invented who ended up on this coast, the west coast of North America, had to sail around Cape Horn, and they had to sail around the world to do it. They had to come here from, say, England or France or Spain, sail around Cape Horn, the bottom of South America, and then come to this coast. And then they didn't go back that way because they're sailing against the wind. They had to literally sail all the way around the world to end up where they started. So, and there's something that fascinated me about that. I mean, and I've sailed, what is it now? It's probably another 25 or 30,000 miles on this coast, just following in those same footsteps, like Cook looking for the Northwest Passage, or Vancouver surveying this coast, or La Perouse, a Frenchman, surveying on this coast, Bodega de Quadra, the guy who was in charge of the Spanish, maritime empire at the time that Cook, or the time that Canada was basically mapped, at the time of Lewis and Clark. So all this mapping that happened in North America and the world's oceans happened at the time of Lewis and Clark, a very small period of time when Lewis and Clark thumped away across, the American continent via the Missouri River and then the Columbia and the Snake. They did it at the same time that Cook was sailing, pretty
Mm.
much, that Mackenzie was going to the north, and so this mapping of the world happened in a very short period of time. So that's always fascinated me. My father was a surveyor, so that's what we did, and so I'm that's one of the reasons. The other reason, I like to do hard things, and that happens to be pretty hard.
That's
Um,
got to be wicked hard, man. That's got
and
to be wicked hard. What's it like? I've heard the Cape is like one of the most dangerous, challenging ways to sail when you have to get down
yeah,
there and get around that. It's really wicked down there.
yeah, it's like the Mount Everest of sailing is Cape Horn.
Yeah. How
Um,
large, how big was your sailboat? What size is the sailboat?
45 feet.
That's yeah, wow. I mean, that's a nice size
Yeah,
boat for one person to hang out on, but it's also like a cork.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah, it's
in
it's
the
it's it's a big boat when it's sitting at the dock, but when you're off of Cape Horn, the waves are like 50 feet. It's a pretty small boat.
oh
So
my
yeah,
gosh, oh my God.
it's the most extreme environment on the planet, including Antarctica, including the top of a mountain, because well, you can't walk on it, you can't breathe it. So
Yeah.
and it's incredibly beautiful, number one, but it's also incredibly dangerous. So like looking at a mountain, is beautiful, but it'll kill you in a heart blink, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or an eye
So
blink.
what's it like when you know you're heading there? Like, how long does it take to make that turn? What time frame does it take to make that turn and know you're safe from the time you
Oh, you're
enter and exit?
there's so it takes it the boat Suburban, my boat was is actually pretty slow. So it took me about 70 days, 70 sailing days to get from basically Seattle, or what, Vancouver, Victoria, which is the same latitude as Seattle, down there. And and then it took me another 60, or took me 70 days once I got out of the Southern Ocean to sail up the Pacific. So that's 130 days. That meant I spent 130 days in the Southern Ocean, back in, basically in the shit, as they would say. Excuse the French. So once you turn and make that hard left-hand turn as you're going to go around the world, it's 130 days later you get to make the hard left-hand turn to come home.
Yeah, that's pretty wicked. I've seen documentaries on that, and
Yeah,
I'm watching these guys just getting the shit kicked out of them with the boat and the wind and the
yeah,
waves, and I'm going, I love the ocean. I love sailing. I just don't, plus the water's freezing ass cold. I mean,
yeah.
it's not like it's warm, sunny
No,
water smacking you in the face
no,
when you're
no,
making that
no,
turn.
no. The water is, between 30. It can be as cold as, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's cold, and there's no heat on the boat. It's cold. Yeah, it's cold.
That's just like getting hit with a snowball in the face 150 times an hour.
Yeah,
That's just crazy.
yeah. Well,
So
here's
how different is if it is at all? I mean, is it do you see when you're sailing around since you've been doing it so long? Is the ocean, are the tides, are things just that different on our planet when you're out there? Because you're seeing things that no one will ever see. You're in places no
Mhm.
one will ever go. Is it different from when you first started years and years ago?
It's a little bit different. There's definitely been an impact on the marine life. So whether that's marine mammals or just fish in general, there's obviously a degradation in those populations. And I suppose the most obvious one is the degradation in bird populations because they're easier to see than a fish, right? A fish
Yeah.
doesn't have to be very far below the surface. And that's really sad because it's the canary in the coal mine. I mean, there's something to be said about avian populations as harbingers of well, I won't say doom because that sounds ever so pessimistic, but the, these large bird species like albatross that rely on squid and that they rely on a very specific level of the food chain. And once, like we talked about earlier, once the food chains, once you pull one link, then the chain tends to collapse. So bird populations have declined. But that isn't to say I'm not pessimistic about it, because there's very smart people who are have dedicating lives and careers to dealing with it. And the gloves are kind of off. I mean, this it never used to be like the Canadian government, as an example, was back in the day that I was a scientist studying, oceanography and in particular, salmon migration routes. The Canadian government was actively involved in censoring scientific thought. You couldn't write a paper without it having going through a governmental bureaucrat's hands and then them giving you the okay. Because you worked in my case, I was at a university, you worked for the Institute of Ocean Sciences, these government labs. So that doesn't happen anymore. Like that's not allowed. That doesn't happen. So this idea that people having access to information is a good thing. So there are people doing really, really smart things. So let me give you an example of that would be there's a scientist who decided he wanted to get a handle on the offshore illegal fishing catch. And that's a very hard thing to do because it's in a part of the world that no one sees and it's a long ways away from what people seem to care about. So what he did was he strapped a GPS and magnetometer onto an albatross because an albatross spends 2 years at sea and they fly literally thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of square miles, and they're attracted to ships. So every time that the magnetometer went off, they're near a ship. And if that ship wasn't on AIS, which is automatic identification system, like every ship over 20 meters long in the ocean has to have, by international law, AIS on it. And if there was no AIS signal, including military ships, by the way, if there was
Hmm.
no AIS signal, then that boat was likely fishing illegally. So he strapped magnetometers and GPS, was a very, very cheap thing to do, on something like 160 albatross, and they covered 45 million square miles of the South Pacific. And he found that his numbers reflected very, very accurately what estimates were previously of what commercial, illegal commercial fishing was. But you catch these people with it was literally getting them with their proverbial pants down, because then you could contact, okay, there's a ship there, who is it? And they could then send a particular asset, whether it's a satellite if it's near a coast, they could fly over it with a plane and take a picture and say, okay, what are you guys doing here? This isn't right. This is illegal. So there's very smart people doing very smart things that are having real impacts on some of the real problems we have because we're really good at adapting. As an example, you adapt an albatross to find, with some interesting technology to go find an illegal ship. So there's people who are, I'm optimistic about our future, even
Now,
though
how far can a drone go? Could you use a drone to do that instead of an albatross?
no, because there's not enough sunlight in the Southern Ocean for the drone to keep flying. It has to run on solar powered, right? So the longest I went without seeing any sky that I could use, like any sun or stars, was something like 17 days.
Wow.
So a drone just can't fly that long. It needs more sunlight, and it has to
Did you
fly.
did you bring a drone on your
No,
sail? No.
no, I never did. No,
No.
yeah,
Yeah, because those things are getting pretty scary, pretty
yeah.
amazing at the same time. Their capabilities are getting pretty scary for us. So, what do you think, Bert? I mean, you've been so gracious with your time. I don't want to take up too much more, but what do you think? is going to happen with our oceans? I mean, are people going to wake up and get off this climate crisis that we got to drop the the climate by 1 Celsius or whatever craziness they're talking about, which the ocean would do if we would heal the ocean.
Mm.
Are we going to get off that and start focusing on the one thing that makes our planet different than every other planet, which is our oceans and our ecosystem, or are we just going to let our oceans die? I mean, what do you think we're going to see?
Well, I'm optimistic about it, and I'm optimistic because I think technology will be able to. We're smart enough to come up with with technologies that can clean up some of our own messes. I'm optimistic because I think that we're finally becoming smart about clean energy, and I think we're finally becoming smart about the energy densities required to run the kinds of civilization that we have. Like we literally can't turn the clock back to where everyone's living in a cave. Like that's just not going to happen. So and our reliance on fossil fuels is going to come to an end, I think, and it's going to come to an end properly. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with fossil fuels. I'm saying that they're a requirement given the way that we've chosen to live, but there's ways to make the use of those fuels very, very efficient and clean. And then in the interim, as we're making those like look at the air quality in California. When I first moved to California, the air quality was very poor. But then through technology and regulation, like good regulation, stuff that that does good, they managed to clean up, now do make real inroads into pollutants in the air, and certainly pollutants that you can literally see with your eyes. So that's a technological achievement, and I think the same thing is going to happen across the board in a much bigger scale in a very short order. Mostly because the requirements, energy requirements for AI are 10 times that of what normal computing is. So we need energy sources we don't have, and that's going to move us away from this hand waving about solar and wind, because there just isn't enough energy density in those platforms to run anything. And AI, our use of technology is not going away; it's going up exponentially. Our energy requirements are going exponentially. We're just going to have to come up with a way to meet those. And there's certainly very good ways to do that. There are, for example, thorium salt reactors the size of a
Wait,
fridge.
wait, wait. What are those? So,
A thorium salt reactor, which is basically a form of nuclear reactor that can't run away. It runs on a fuel that's much less hazardous than purified or highly refined uranium. And the end result of it is basically nothing. It's basically almost a piece of lead. There's as much leftover radiation after a thorium reactor is run out as there is in coal, because coal itself is radioactive.
what's the energy source for it? I mean, what fuels it if it's not like uranium or something like that? What would fuel it?
It's a salt. It's basically it's like basically a salt like a thorium. But you can get a reactor the size of a fridge, like a large fridge,
Yeah.
buried in the ground. It'll run for 25 years, and it will run, say, for example, all of Victoria, British Columbia, which is something like 500,000. Well, I shouldn't say 500,000 people, but it'll run a town of 50,000 people. And when you dig this thing up, you basically have nothing more hazardous than a lump of coal, which is about the same sort of levels of radioactivity. So there's
Where
tech.
are we? Where are we in making that a functioning, usable energy source right now?
Oh,
How
there's
far
there's
away?
there's a race, like there's a full-blown race to make those things commercially available. there there are
Wow.
companies that, so we're on the right path. We're on the
Yeah.
right path. And
Yeah.
if you can create high energy densities, then you can relieve some of the fossil fuel load on the earth, and then you can, and that by even by itself is going to make a huge difference in the health of the oceans indirectly. So I think we're going to make inroads on, I think, on the health of the oceans indirectly. We're going to make inroads in the commercial fishing, because there's international will to turn around illegal commercial fishing. For example, there's international will to regulate commercial fishing properly. There's international will to ensure that we're not completely going down the same path. So I'm optimistic about it, because I think again, technology is going to help, and I think that there's a will that hasn't existed in a very long time. So I can speak to that here, when it comes to salmon fishery or cod fishery or lobster fisheries on the East Coast. It's cod and lobster on the East Coast of Canada, and then salmon on this coast. And of course, there's people, who like yourself, who are just far more concerned about it, and are waving the flag, right? When saying, hey, we should all stand up and take some notice. Like this, for example, think of your own platform to do this. It didn't exist, 5 years ago, right? There was,
Yeah.
but now you have the potential to meet, to reach out and speak directly to tens of thousands, if not more people, and you get to say, okay, we have an issue. Maybe we could all stand up and say something about it. And uh,
Yeah.
and then
I
again,
don't think I wish it wasn't a political thing. I wish it
well,
was that's always kind of been my beef for example, I love solar here in the desert. Solar in the desert makes a ton of sense, right?
yeah, of
Because we
course,
have 360 days of sunshine. But what the government did is they decided first they're going to help you get solar, then they're going to help you use the solar, but now we're going to take your electricity from your
yeah,
roof and give it to the electricity company, so it
yeah,
hasn't helped anybody do anything, and your bills still go up. So
hmm
so I don't have solar on my roof because I didn't want to fall for that deal. But if I could put solar on my roof and
hmm
it went into a battery that was sitting on the side of my house, and during the day I use the sun, and at night I use the battery, and then tomorrow the sun come out and recharge my battery, and I'm off the grid, I'm 1,000% for solar, right? Then it
yeah,
makes sense. Um, Wind out here is a disaster. I mean, they've tried
hmm
wind out here in the desert for years. It's just a complete disaster. It
yeah,
doesn't do anything. But I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, while we have petroleum and it's there, it's going to be there for a while. So we need to make it clean, and we need to make it while we're working on something else, right? You don't just
hmm
completely shut it off and go put a windmill on your house, you'll be fine. It's just insanity, right?
yeah,
But like when Microsoft bought 3 Mile Island, I thought, wow,
yeah,
you know what I mean? They're
yeah,
buying a decrepit, rundown nuclear reactor for their AI plant
correct,
because they know that they need that much power. So,
yeah,
like you said, that cube. I mean, if we could build little nuclear reactors around each one of these power plants, would be amazing. But it's
yeah,
still such a wild creature, right? I mean, the nuclear is still kind of a
yeah.
wild animal that they can't control.
Well, it has a very bad reputation. Like France is 75% nuclear.
Yep.
And they decided, when sort of the green energy scourge swept Europe, they decided they would shutter all those plants. So they went down to about 30%. And then energy prices skyrocketed, and there was brownouts everywhere. And then, suddenly it was we're running way short of electricity. And where do we get it from? Like, we can't get it from our
So they got from
competitors.
Russia.
Yeah, get it from Russia. It doesn't sound like a good idea. So they've been busy. They've been busy, recommissioning all those plants. And it's pretty much the same, and that's why Microsoft bought 3 Mile Island. They're not going to necessarily use the same technology that was there before, but they're gonna have I mean, there's all kinds of fingers in the pie. Like GE in particular has the patent on certain nuclear technology, and they've been sort of cornered that market in terms of the government for a long time. So all those, I guess, the gloves are coming off. They're letting the horses run, as it were, when it comes to that kind of technology, because you just can't wait. We just don't have the luxury of sort of twiddling our thumbs and letting corporate monopolies control resources that are literally, I hate to say national security risk, but they're
They
risking
are.
the,
They're human risks, and they're
yeah,
national
human risks.
security
Yeah,
risks. And I think we just have a couple bad players out there. So, I mean,
yeah,
China's building what, a coal plant every day,
yeah,
which, you can't put a dome over China. I mean, that pollutant's not gonna just stay in China. But
hmm
but would I be more fearful with them building a coal plant a day or them building a nuclear reactor a day? You know what I mean? I mean, do I
yeah,
trust them building that many nuclear reactors, even though it's technically probably a safer, cleaner energy source?
yeah. I don't think they have the tech. They're behind on the technology in that, for sure. But
Yeah.
but you're right about. I mean, the other thing too, if you look at solar, look at the differences in batteries in the last 5 years. So the battery technology is exploding as well, which makes solar more and more and more viable. Like here in
What
Canada,
technology? Oh, battery
battery
technology. Yeah,
technology.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So here in Canada, where a good part of it is off the grid by definition, It's all solar. There's small run of the river projects, which is a small river running a hydro generator, like something that spins because of the current, which provides enough electricity for a house and a fridge and lights and things like that. And then solar, because even though we're not as sunny as the desert, there's still is enough solar radiation to power a very smart battery, as opposed to the old lead acid battery. So this idea of battery technology is really important, and I think there'll be advances. Well, I know that there are advances in battery technology coming that are literally gonna change the way that the world can look at solar. I look at cruising sailboats, for example. Every single one of them has solar panels on them, and every single one of them is those solar panels are using smart chargers to charge lithium-ion batteries, which that didn't exist even 5 years ago. And that's a huge game changer for off-grid type living. So, but then, government regulation tends to stifle that kind of innovation. Like you had said, they say, okay, well, you're doing it, and we want to steal that, literally,
Exactly.
right? They literally want to steal it from you, and they're,
They literally want to steal it from you. Yeah,
yeah,
it's so bizarre, but it is a national security issue because I think, we've learned. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that in the 70s, you could only get gas on even and odd
yeah,
days,
same,
because the
yeah,
Saudis turned off our gas and our oil because we decided not to do it. And the same thing when our friends up north said, listen, if you're going to put tariffs, then we're going to shut off your electricity. And not don't want to get into the political aspect of it, but I mean that just shows that how vulnerable everybody is. Is during COVID, we don't have any medicine, we don't have antibiotics because we let China make all of our antibiotics. I mean, it's these things that put us all at risk.
hmm
But my biggest thing is what we started on is the oceans, and
hmm
I'm just so grateful that you joined me about that. So I have one last question before I let
sure.
you go. I promise this is it. You've been so gracious with your time. So, Bert, if you had a thought you want to leave us with, if you had one last thing that meant something to you that you'd love to share with us and said, "Gosh, this really means a lot, and I want people to know about it." What would be a last thought that you have that you'd love to share with us before we skedaddle?
Well, I think we've talked about a lot of things that seem a little pessimistic, but I want to make sure that I want to leave everyone with the idea that there's way more reason to be optimistic than there is to be pessimistic. Yeah, we have serious problems that are facing us, but there's serious people who are looking into like serious people who are trying to address those problems. And it doesn't just have to be serious people, it can be just people like you and I. So the fact that you and I are actually talking about this is a huge big step towards solving the problem. And the other thing is that there isn't anything in the world that you or I or anyone else is passionate about that someone hasn't dedicated their life to. So what I'm saying is that anyone can contribute to the global knowledge base by engaging in some form of citizen scientist or citizen sciencery. For example, a surfer who goes out every day to go surfing or every other day, they have a very good idea of what wave heights are. Well, actual observations of wave height is really, really important information for people who are interested in longshore transport of soils. So, soils move up and down coasts, and one of the things that impacts that is wave height. And there are people who've dedicated their entire careers to understanding how soils and materials are transported along coastlines, which is a very interesting problem because that means pollutants, it means food sources, it means everything. So anything that you are passionate about, there is a scientist somewhere who's dying to know, to have some idea of what you're seeing. And it can be anybody. It can be as simple as wave heights. It could be as simple as counting pieces of plastic in the ocean, which is what I did when I sailed around the world. I spent a certain amount of time every day as I could looking for
Thank
plastic,
you.
and that's hugely valuable information. And it's you're contributing to the global knowledge base. You're doing a very good thing, because serious people need that information, and it's valuable. And the other thing is that it's adding to this groundswell of people who are concerned about things that are important to them, and then pushing those things forward to a much better state. So I would encourage everyone, one, to be optimistic, and two, to try to find those things that you're passionate about, and then contribute to the global knowledge base.
I love that. I love that. There's a thing, and gosh, it's skipping my brain what it's called, but we are always picking stuff up when we dive. I mean, we
Yeah.
make it like a challenge, a group of us. But there's a, a website, and gosh, I can't remember the name. But when we get out of the water, we take out whatever we found,
Hmm.
we take a picture of it, and we upload it to that site.
There's,
And all the divers who are on that do it to show, hey, I got this, I found this, I found that, to show all the garbage the trash we're pulling out.
hmm
And it's just that type of community, right? I mean, I think
right.
it's a type of community, I think AI is going to change so much. It's going to change so much, and like anything else, it's a tool. It could change things for the better. It can change things for total, disaster for the
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it still comes down to us, right? I mean, it
Exactly.
comes down to you and I. It comes down to you sailing the oceans, finding these shores, picking up trash. Me and my
Hmm.
wife picking up trash out of the ocean, having these conversations, um, and just try to bring down the rhetoric a little bit about
hmm
what's going on in the world as far as political garbage, because it's all just distraction.
hmm
We need to focus on what's really going on, and that we're just people all trying to survive this little blue rock.
hmm
So, I'm really grateful you came on. Again, I'm sorry I was late. That was my mistake, but I'm just so, so grateful. You're awesome, my friend. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with us.
No, it's been my pleasure. It's been a passion of mine for a long time, and I think that there's a lot of good things that can come from conversations like this. So it's been a real honor and privilege to speak with you today. And it was my again, it was me being late. And so you don't. I'm going to take credit where credit is due. So it's on me.
Well, you're awesome. Well, everybody, we've just been exposed to a really great, great guy doing so much good stuff. Bert Terhart, not only with his oceanography, but with his software engineering and what he's doing with healthcare and what he's doing for the planet and what you're doing moving forward. Really grateful. You're doing some great stuff and helping the world, and that's a great legacy to leave, my friend. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
No, it's my pleasure, and it's good to start the day with a smile. So we've
There you go. All right, everybody.
we've
Look for the another episode of the What If You Could podcast. In the meantime, I will see everybody later. And Bert, really quick before we go, where can people find you? Look into your stuff. Find out more information about Bert Terhart.
Well, I think the best thing is just bertterhart.com, and then from there, there's every rabbit hole. Sadly, there's too many rabbit holes, but that's the easiest way.
Oh, and I'm a rabbit, man. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
to go
yeah.
down all. So, all right, buddy. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Okay,
See ya.
bye bye.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.